For decades, the Kola Superdeep project had moved steadily ahead, transcending the limits of both technology and imagination. Each meter penetrated into the ancient rock felt like a victory over the Earth itself. But under all the euphoria and scientific anticipation, there was tension. The Earth was never going to give up its secrets without a fight. And eventually, it did precisely that, with disastrous effects. The very crust that the Soviets had been struggling to comprehend suddenly turned against them, and just a temporary pause in their operation was enough to create one of the biggest setbacks of drilling history. In 1984 late, after over 10 years of incessant drilling, the Kola crew stepped away from their work briefly to attend the International Geological Congress in Moscow. As they returned to the site on the 27th of September, they anticipated picking up work from where they had stopped. But nature had other intentions. As the drill rested, time and pressure had combined to alter the well itself. Parts of the borehole not yet supported by steel casing had started deforming. Without a continuing process of drilling and support, the rock walls subtly but significantly shifted. And when the team tried to restart operations, they knew something was dreadfully amiss. Just when they began to pull the drill string up to inspect the equipment, it jammed. After hopeless efforts to free the pipe, under extreme pressure, broke at last. A disaster. 5 kilometers of drill pipe and the turbine drill, the most man-hours and years of effort, were stuck irretrievably in the borehole. This disaster broke the team. It was the most serious setback that the project had ever encountered. Overnight, all the work of 5 years literally fell apart to the same ground. Rather than putting down their tools, the Soviets followed the path of gradual modification. They decided to drill around the blockage, a tricky procedure that required interrupting the tight, unconsolidated layers of rock in order to create new paths. What had once been a sharp dive into the earth was now gradually fragmenting into branches and forking routes like a turning stream underground. New deviations would be designed by engineers to go around the stuck equipment, but each deviation had its own risks, leaving a borehole that was no longer a straight line but an oddly twisting complex of side tunnels and deformations, a geological maze into the void. Transcending this convoluted underground would not just be challenging but perilous. New routes brought new uncertainties. Each turn into a new section would imply varying temperatures, varying pressures, and varying compositions of materials. The well had also not been acting like a mechanical system anymore. It had become, in numerous ways, organic, instinctual with shifting resistances and unforeseen conditions. Engineers were on a daily basis battling unimaginable forces directly beneath their feet. One of the most challenging among these was heat. Scientists had indicated that the temperature was to rise gradually by approximately 11 degrees Celsius per kilometer. However, at a deeper part of the borehole, that climbed to an astronomical rise. Between 2.2 and 7.5 kilometers, the rise was already doubled to almost 24 degrees Celsius per kilometer. When they reached almost 12 kilometers, it was a searing 220 degrees Celsius. These temperatures did not only cause problems for the equipment, they destroyed it. Drill bits quickly dulled, lubricants lost their effectiveness, and electronics malfunctioned. Most significantly, the intense heat weakened even the most robust metal components and caused them to warp. But still they persevered. There were to be 6 more years after that 1984 accident before they would reach the target which had originally been laid down, 12,262 meters. It was too expensive. It was an engineering plot, Frankenstein's monster of a creation, the borehole. Only just over a third of the way through the thickness of crystalline continental crust had even been reached. But temperatures were just the start. What they discovered in the depths of the crust broke more than rock, it broke assumptions. When the Kola Superdeep borehole passed the 12-kilometer mark, Soviet geologists were hoping to validate decades of geophysical theory. Seismic data had only mapped out what they thought was the layered structure of the Earth's crust, routine transitions from granite to basalt, rising density, and a gradual increase in heat. Instead, they fell into a scientific minefield. Almost every assumption, built from textbooks and seismic research, was going to be shown to be false. The deeper they drilled, the greater reality strayed from theory. Maybe the initial big shock was the failure of the predicted layer of basalt to show up. Seismic reflections had shown a coming of a tougher basalt layer below, following about 7 kilometers of granite. The transition zone was critical to the geologic picture of the crust. But when it came to Kola, it just was not there. The whole thing did not appear to exist altogether. Drilling went on beyond 7 kilometers, then 8, 9, and 10. No basalt whatsoever, only broken granite, less dense, more porous, and totally out of line with seismic data predictions. The seismic properties of different rocks were already in need of reconsideration. What had appeared a density boundary was now something quite different, a shift in fluid saturation, or a shift in mineral content, not a layer of basalt. And then there was the gold. The almost 9.5 kilometer long borehole drilled through a geochemical anomaly, a rock that carried up to 1 gram of gold for every ton. It was thrilling and puzzling. Clearly, there could be no commercial mining at such a depth. The mere existence of the metal so deep down in the ground created other questions. Had this gold moved down through geological time? Or did it somehow develop under conditions of high pressure, far down from any zone that we would otherwise relate to or formation? Regardless, the deposit was a geological enigma. Even the surprise mineral discoveries were not so much the surprise finds that came after. Fossils. In depths greater than 6 kilometers and rocks dated older than 2.8 billion years, researchers were able to find 14 fossilized microbes. They were single-celled organisms typically linked to early biological activity on Earth. To find these in rocks previously believed to have been produced prior to the evolution of intricate organic life was surprising. Even stranger, some of these fossils were found within crystalline structures instead of sedimentary layers. This implied the fossils persevered or were preserved under conditions once considered unimaginable for living organisms. The implications were immense. If microbial life existed in the past, or even today, in the depths of the Earth where surface biology and sunlight never penetrated, what did that mean about the strength of life? Might Earth's deep biosphere be orders of magnitude bigger than any had supposed? Might life have started underground, not in the oceans? The Kola Superdeep not only questioned geology, it turned biology around, as well. What a mind-boggling implication, then. If there existed, or still exist, living organisms deep within the Earth, out of reach of sunlight and surface biology, then how would that resilience in itself be manifested? Might this indicate that Earth's deep biosphere might be far, far greater than anybody ever had thought? Might life have begun beneath the ground rather than in the sea? But as bizarre as these scientific shocks were, they were still in the domain of nature. What followed set science at an odd angle and moved into legend. Even Kola's toughest scientists were not ready for what followed. In 1989, a routine sinking of sensitive geophysical gear deep underground returned not only data, but something much more odd. On one of the temperature and vibration surveys, a sensitive microphone was dropped into the borehole to capture the faint noises of geologic activity. The hope was straightforward: pick up microseismic sounds, weak rumblings of fracturing rock or grinding movement of the tectonics. But what the device picked up was inexplicable. Rather than intermittent creaks and groans, the playback yielded what some called a distant, ever-present wailing, tens of thousands of human-sounding screams resonating from underneath. The sound was distant, muffled, and spine-tingling. Formally, the team described it as the result of several geologic processes: high-pressure fracturing of the rock, compounded by the resonance of the borehole itself, perhaps modified by interference from temperature change. Very high heat deep beneath the Earth's surface could make rocks deform and fracture in a manner that releases high-frequency acoustic emissions. Unofficially, the tale became a life of its own. Rumors among workers on the site talked of the well to hell, a caption that would go on to rage through Western tabloids and TV. A newspaper account reported that frightened Soviet scientists had stopped drilling upon hearing tormented souls crying in infinite suffering. The story gained momentum when it made its way to sensationalist broadcasters. In the early 1990s, American evangelical radio talk show host Dr. Larry Spargimino retold the story, using it as evidence of a literal hell below the ground. Audio segments, doctored heavily for theatrics, were circulated in the media. Some accounts included fire crackling in the distance. In reality, no credible scientific report ever authenticated supernatural origins. But the tape, genuine or doctored, was credible enough to take hold in the global psyche. Even today, some believers swear the Kola borehole broke into the gates of hell itself. The scientists on site, however, had far more earthly, but equally troubling, reasons to stop drilling. The temperature was rising faster than technology could handle. At nearly 12 kilometers deep, the borehole reached a staggering 220 degrees Celsius, almost 100 degrees hotter than predicted. All that heat rendered further drilling impossible with the technology then available. Drill bits broke within minutes. Metal twisted. Electronics ceased functioning. Each additional meter cost exponentially more resources, money, and risk. By 1992, the fall of the Soviet Union put paid to the project. Finance dried up, priorities altered, and the Kola Superdeep was abandoned, its technology left to decay in the Arctic wind. The site now is a shadow of its former self. The drilling towers have vanished, torn down for scrap. The research buildings, which once hummed with scientists and engineers, lie in shambles, windows broken, roofs collapsed, walls smeared with peeling paint and graffiti. The borehole itself is far from the yawning chasm that everyone envisions. It's capped by a little, heavy metal top, bolted and rusty shut. To the unsuspecting visitor, it appears to be nothing more than a rusty old manhole cover in the center of a broken concrete slab. But under that modest cover exists a vertical wound in the earth, more than 12 kilometers deep, lined with steel casing for the initial distance, and then disappearing into the naked rock of the planet's crust. The lower parts are now flooded and out of reach. The Kola Superdeep is still the deepest artificial location on our planet, a feat that is still unbroken decades later. It did not yield molten lava, prehistoric beasts, or evidence of hell. What it did yield, however, was perhaps even more unsettling, the understanding that the Earth we assumed we knew is stranger, hotter, and more enigmatic than we could have ever supposed. Its legacy is a combination of hard science, myth, and unanswered questions. A testament to human ambition, and a reminder that some secrets are far beyond the reach of our drills.